Now let's talk about in detail about the etiology and the pathogenesis. We touched on it briefly in the start of the lecture, the basic uh, introduction, that this is basically a coagulation disorder. To understand it further, we have to analyze it. We're using the coagulation cascade in detail. To start off again, if we have a bleed, if there is a vessel injury, it leads to bleeding into the interstitium. So the various interstitial factors, they activate the hemostatic pathway. The first thing that happens is primary hemostasis, which is because in which there is initial vasoconstriction because of sympathetic overflow that leads to a decreased blood supply to that area. Afterwards, what happens is primary hemostasis, in which a platelet plug forms. Platelets are adhered because of the various endothelial factors being secreted by the damaged endothelium, and the incoming platelets recruit further platelets, and that leads to a primary hemostasis, a primary plug formation. That primary plug is not very strong, and it needs to get reinforced, and that reinforcement is provided by the coagulation cascade. This is an overview of the coagulation cascade pathway. There are two pathways, the intrinsic pathway and the extrinsic pathway, and both of them lead to a final common pathway. And afterwards, the output of this is a cross-linked fibrin clot, and this fibrin clot basically interacts with the platelet plug that is being formed initially, and that leads to the formation of a strong plug. That leads to sealing of that blood vessel which has been bleeding, and the stoppage of the blood loss. So to understand it, let's start it from the common pathway. We have to reach at this point. Factor 10 is the major, common pathway that leads to the further stimulation of the further sectors downstream. The important factors here in the common pathway are the factors 10, then there is a calcium, the phospholipids, and the factor 5. These four things basically lead to the final common pathway. And to arrive at this final common pathway, we have the two branches, the extrinsic pathway and an intrinsic pathway. The words extrinsic and intrinsic are basically, these are because of how do these pathways get activated. All of these coagulation factors are secreted by the liver, and vitamin K is required for a lot of factors activation. So vitamin K abnormalities can lead to certain types of factor deficiencies as well. We name this pathway as an extrinsic pathway because it is being activated by factors which are outside of the blood vessel, extrinsic to the blood vessel, like various types of tissue plasminogen factors. They lead to activation of this extrinsic pathway. And for the intrinsic pathway, it is basically stimulated by various factors inside the vessel, like endothelium produces high molecular weight kininogens and certain other types of cytokines that lead to activation of this intrinsic pathway. For the extrinsic pathway, then we only have this one coagulation factor, factor 7. This factor 7 is activated because of certain types of extrinsic substances which are stimulated because of the blood oozing out into the interstitium. That factor 7 activation leads to activation of the factor 10 and leads to a conversion into the 10A factor. A here means activated. So factor 10 is which is generally in an inactivated form, and it is moving around into the blood. When the factor 7 is stimulated, it leads to activation of the factor 10 to the factor 10A, its activated form. Now let's move on to intrinsic pathway. In the intrinsic pathway, the first factor to be stimulated is the factor 12. It is also called a Hagman factor. It is stimulated by the various types, for example, the high molecular weight kininogens here, which are secreted whenever there is a vessel injury. That factor 12 stimulation converts it into a factor 12A. It further stimulates downstream factors, like the factor 12 stimulates the factor 11 to convert into the factor 11A, its activated form. The 11A, with the help of calcium, stimulates the factor 9 to convert it into factor 9A, which is its activated form. And then factor 9A, along with the factor 8, it stimulates the factor 8 as well to convert it into factor 8A, and the factor 9A and 8A, with the help of calcium and phospholipids, stimulate this factor 10 into factor 10A. Now, both these pathways, at one time, majorly one pathway is at work. Either the intrinsic pathway will be activated or the extrinsic pathway will be activated. It doesn't make sense to activate both the pathways at once. So that leads to a final common pathway, factor 10A stimulation. When the factor 10A is activated, with the help of calcium and the factor 5A, which are its cofactors, it leads to stimulation of the prothrombin. Prothrombin is factor 2. Prothrombin is activated and generally it's converted into thrombin. What does thrombin do? Thrombin, or it's an activated factor 2A. It leads to activation of the fibrinogen. Now, fibrinogen is the factor 1, and it is present in an inactivated form throughout the blood. And when thrombin is activated, it leads to cleavage of the fibrinogen, and it turns the big fibrinogen molecule into various types of small monomers, into small parts. Those fibrin monomers then reattach themselves to form a fibrin polymer. And that fibrin polymer is basically reinforced by this factor 13A, which is outside of these pathways. This factor 13A, this reinforces the fibrin polymers and cross-links them to form a fibrin clot. And afterwards, this cross-linked fibrin clot interacts with the already formed platelet plug in the primary hemostasis and reinforces basically the hemostasis and reinforces that platelet plug. So this was an overview of how both pathways interact, the platelet pathway and also the pathways of the coagulation factors. Now, based on these demarcations, we have certain types of laboratory tests that can help us in assessing the various stages of these pathways. For the extrinsic pathway, we assess for the factor 7 with the help of the prothrombin time. So prothrombin time, if it is elongated, or if it is increased, we can say that this is a problem with the extrinsic pathway, or factor 7 deficiency, or factor 7 is not working efficiently. For the intrinsic pathway, we measure it with the help of activated partial thromboplastin time, or APTT. For the common pathway, since it has reinforcement from the both pathways, we can use either studies, the APTT and PTT, to study the final common pathway. So basically, you can say that the PT, or the thromboplastin time, prothrombin time, it basically studies the factor 7, the factor 10, factor 5, along with the prothrombin or thrombin. To study the fibrinogen monomer or the factor 1, we use the thrombin time, TT, as abbreviated here. Why is it important to understand all of this in the context of hemophilia? In the hemophilia, we said that there is a factor 8 abnormality, and factor 8 is present here in the intrinsic pathway. Factor 8 problem leads to hemophilia A, and factor 9 problem leads to hemophilia B. So if we have a deficiency of factor 8 here, it leads to problems with the activation of the intrinsic pathway and activation of the final common pathway. And that's why there won't be a very good, strong coagulation plug form, or basically the coagulation factors will not be activated further downwards from the factor 10, and the fibrin meshwork will not be very strong and will not form. And so all we have is primary hemostatic plug, the platelet plug, to wall off the injury. If there is not a coagulation cascade activation, then that will lead to bleeding episodes, and that's what we see in hemophilia. There are a lot of bleeds. Bleeding is basically the hallmark of the disease. For the Christmas disease or the hemophilia B, we have the factor 9 deficiency, and again that leads to the problems, as similar problems as well. So this was an overview of hemophilia pathogenesis. How do the factors interact with each other? How do they lead to activation of this coagulation cascade, and how does it interact with the platelet plug formation? One important thing to realize or understand here is that whenever we have a platelet problem, the bleeding is generally superficial. We will have a lot of petechiae, we might have epistasis, but there will be superficial bleeding. For the coagulation problems, the bleeding will be deep. The bleeding will be inside the joints. It can be a muscular bleed. It can be inside of various organs like the genitourinary tract, leading to hematuria. It can be CNS bleed, leading to intracranial hypertension or various types of subarachnoid hemorrhages. So the types of bleeding which we have helps us in identifying the various disorders, whether it is a platelet disorder or it is a coagulation disorder. And the other things that help us in identifying this are these various markers. So for hemophilia, what do you expect when we are going to study about the labs? But you can have an idea about the labs here. Since there is a factor 8 deficiency only and it is an intrinsic pathway, the APTT will be the only study that will be basically abnormal, or the APTT time will the only study that will be large or long. PT will be normal. thromboplastin time will be normal, the platelet studies will be normal, there will be a normal platelet count or a normal bleeding time, because bleeding time generally assesses the platelet blood formation. So this was important to have a good basic understanding of the disease process, and moving forwards it will be easy for us to understand the various clinical features, complications, and how do we diagnose this disease.